Welcome to the 5th Annual Aphasia Conference. Title this year is Mental Health and Hope. I first of all want to thank so many of you that attended the session last Saturday. Great feedback, and I'm just really happy that everyone was able to attend. If you weren't, we will be recording all our sessions, and they will be sent back on our website later in the month of July, maybe. So stay tuned. I want to send out a really big thank you to the Rhode Island Department of Health for sponsoring us 2 years in a row. Couldn't do it without their support. It's been amazing working with them. I'd also like to put out a big thank you to National Aphasia Association, connecting with us and making this happening and helping us educate the world about aphasia. If you're interested in CEUs, we are, CareLink and Risha are working on getting the CEUs for you. So if you need those and interested, they are on our chat. Okay, you all set? And the, let me see. We're going to mute. We already took care of that. Every session to be recorded. Got that. Those. And big thank you to our guest speakers today, Elaine, Jerry, Deb. And a big thank you to Judy and her team for her recording of this. I can't say it's not a poem. What is it? It is a, Jerry, help me with this. You're muted.
I will unmute and say this is a play or a choral reading, whatever you want to call it. Maybe Judy can tell you that she is the playwright, and it's an amazing piece. I hope you enjoy it.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Elaine McDonald, as she is the speaker, and for our presentation today, which is The Other Voice of Aphasia. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Denise. Can everybody hear me? Just
yes.
Okay, thank you. Again, welcome to the 5th Annual Just Ask Conference. This conference, I remember when Denise was starting it, and I just find it so wonderful that we're here 5 years later and it has reached such a vast audience. So thank you to everybody for joining us. This is session 2, so just so everybody knows where they are, of the 4 sessions. Our session is going to run from 9 to 11 today. We're going to include plenty of time for questions. So, please feel free to ask your questions, write them in chat. There is a good amount of time at the end for questions, but ask as you go along if you'd like. There are 2 people who are going to join me for the panel at the end in the open discussion, Jerry Kaplan and Deb Burton. Jerry is a speech language pathologist at the BU Aphasia Center, and Deb Burton has a Master's of Science in Gerontology, and she is the director of Rhode Island Elder Info. I have usually speakers, if they're employed, have to disclose their financial disclosures. I have no financial disclosures, just for the record. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am a clinical social worker. I became interested in working with people with aphasia and stroke survivors. When I worked inpatient at Rhode Island Hospital, they have a Joint Commission accredited stroke center. And I started doing a stroke survivor support group, I think 15 years ago. It's been a long time, but so I have a real passion for this field. I am also a care partner myself. My husband did not have a stroke. I just want to say that. He has a chronic disease called hemophilia, and most people probably heard of that back with Ryan White and that whole group of people. So it's been a journey for 40 years. And so I've become especially interested in the impact of strokes and aphasia on the care partners. Yeah, so can we go to the next slide, please, Ben? Yeah, can we actually, that was my first one, and we did that coastal theme since we're in Rhode Island. Can we go to slide 2, please? So I just want to give folks an overview of what is going to happen during this morning's session. We're going to have an overview of what a care partner is. Care partner is a new term relatively, and folks will sometimes say, what's the difference between a caregiver and a care partner? So we're going to take some time and review that. We're also going to talk about some of the challenges that care partners face. And I think one of the important things is knowing, like, is your level of distress the same as other care partners? Is it time to get some additional help? So there are tools that help us measure that. So we're going to review some of those tools. After that, we're going to have the highlight of today's session, which is the play written by Judy Blatt, The Other Voices of Aphasia. Judy is going to give us an introduction and go over sort of her inspiration for this, but it is a play. There's 5 cast members, and it was performed, I don't know where others saw it, but I saw it at the BU Aphasia Center last August, and I found it so incredibly moving, and it really spoke to me, and it kind of, in a brief way, summarizes our experiences. So the BU Aphasia Center kindly agreed to let us show it here today. So that is the middle of the session. After that, we're going to allow a little bit of time for people to discuss any emotions or reactions they may have had to the play. And then we're going to have Deb Burton do a presentation on resources for care partners. After Deb's presentation, we're going to have an open discussion where I'm hopeful that people can share with each other how they have coped with particular scenario, situations, emotions, and that we can have a robust discussion. So that is this morning's agenda. And can you go to slide 3, Ben? Thank you. So slide 3 is, this is my favorite. There's many definitions that have come out about care partners and caregivers, but this is my favorite one. I don't usually read my slides, but I'm going to read them for this presentation. So it says, what is the difference between a care partner and a caregiver? And this definition says the difference is that of a one versus a two-way street. A caregiver is someone who provides care for someone who is unable to care for themselves. The term implies a one-way relationship between two people. One gives and the other receives. It suggests that a passive role is taken by the recipient of care. However, caring is often a two-way street, and this balance of care is more fully captured by the term care partner. A partnership is characterized by mutual cooperation and joint responsibilities. There are opportunities to give as well as receive by both parties in a care partnership. The term is more inclusive and egalitarian. So I like this definition, and I think it speaks to many of the people in this community. There are folks who've had a stroke and they may not necessarily need hands-on care, but there are many ways in which a partnership is formed and the spouses work with each other to make life work in a different way. And so I like this idea of a partnership and how to get to a point where instead of someone passively receiving things and one person saying it's time to take your meds, it's time to do this, how they come up with solutions that work, I think really better captures the care partner experience. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, good, okay. If you can go, thank you. So some of the challenges, and these are, you're gonna, when you hear the play, I think these are really gonna jump out at folks. I think for the stroke and aphasia community, it's a much different experience than I had. Care partners often assume this role without warning or preparation. You know, you can be fine one day and a stroke just happens quickly and your life is changed so quickly. And it takes, I think, a great deal of time to prepare for that. So that's one of the things that is a big challenge for care partners. Care partners also have to be prepared to deal with changes that can range from economic changes, role changes, social changes. For anybody who's ever been through the Social Security disability process, it can be very draining and time consuming. And in the meantime, families are left struggling with, reducing from a 2 income family to a 1 income family. And if someone needs care and someone's trying to work, it's all sorts of challenges in that initial period post-stroke. Care partners sometimes assist with the medical management of a stroke. And stroke survivors enter a different world with new language and challenges. And I think that really is going to resonate with a lot of our care partners. I know I had someone in my group recently, one of my groups, say they were diagnosed with aphasia in the hospital, but they didn't even know what it meant. Nobody explained what it meant, and they had to look it up in a dictionary when they went home. And that is a challenge not only for stroke survivors, but for their partners as well. You're communicating with a group of people, neurologists that are bright and well trained, but they use language and words that are not common and that people don't know. And it's a very steep learning curve. Care partners can also be challenged trying to help stroke survivors with the emotional impact of a stroke while trying to manage their own emotions and worries. For me, this is, as a social worker especially, this is one of the things that concerns me the most is, there's physical rehab, there's speech rehab, but there's no, emotional rehab. And families are often left to try to sort out how to best manage the emotional changes that can accompany a stroke. So that's basically the whole reason we're all here this morning. So if we can go to the next slide, I think that'd be great. Thank you. There are about a bazillion tools out there that assess stress in care partners. This one I chose to put up, it's the Zarit Caregiver Burden Assessment. I'm just going to say right off the bat, I didn't name it and I hate the title, but it is widely used. And when you're looking for a tool to use with people, you want a tool that has good reliability, and good validity. So what that means is that if you give the scale to people, you want it to yield results that are consistent across time and consistent across the different phases of being a caregiver. So older caregivers, younger caregivers, new caregivers, experienced caregivers. So this tool does have that. I think it was initially developed in the 1980s. This tool is designed to be completed by the care partner. There's several variations of this particular Zarit caregiver assessment. The one that I think is most commonly used is the 12 scale. And what it asks you to do is self-assess, self-rate your own feelings. So, for example, the first question is, do you feel you don't have enough time for yourself? And so you rate it on a scale of never, which is 0, to rarely, sometimes, quite frequently, or nearly always. So they want you to think about not just your responsibilities with your partner, but all of your responsibilities, between work and managing a house and being a partner. Do you have enough time for yourself? And at the end of the 12, you add it up and you get your score. And based on that score, you can sort of analyze where you are and what might be helpful to you. So we're going to just go through the 12 questions, because as you watch the play, I want you to think about these things for yourself.
Elaine,
Yes.
who would take these tests? I don't think my husband ever had anybody ask him these questions as a care partner. Where would you find that, and who tells you to take these scales?
Now, that's an excellent question, Denise. Usually, sometimes therapists use them, like if you're going for some individual counseling, per se. Sometimes therapists will give them to gauge where you are at the beginning, and then it helps your therapist and like say Ken figure out what are the areas that he's feeling particular stress around, because it kind of helps you narrow down the resources into what you're going to need. Is it personal therapy? Is it respite care? Is it getting someone in the house to do additional tasks? So I don't know that these are used enough, Denise. They tried to, when I was at Rhode Island Hospital, they tried to incorporate this into an initial assessment. But the problem there is that folks like just had a stroke. So you don't even know how this is going to impact your life at that point. So it should really be given, further out, and ideally would be given like a neurologist would give it to folks at their appointments, and you could review it. But I think that's an excellent point, that we don't assess caregiver or care partner stress enough at all. So the first question is the one we reviewed. Do you feel you don't have enough time for yourself? The second is, do you feel stressed between caring and meeting other responsibilities? So they mean, do you feel that you're juggling too many things, and that causes you stress, and you're always having to prioritize where to put your time and your energy? Number 3 is, do you feel angry when you are around your relative? I will say this is another one I don't really love, but I didn't write the assessment. And I guess the thought behind this is sometimes people can feel resentful to somebody that they feel may have made more work in their life, or I think sometimes it's hard to feel like you're the sole breadwinner. I mean, we know that your loved one, your partner cannot work, but you can have a resentment around that. So that's how I personally think of that question. Number 4 is, do you feel your relative, your partner, affects your relationship with others in a negative way? I'm just going to, there was just a, oh, thank you. They put the caregiver assessment in the chat if anybody would like it. And it in that, just for the reference, it gives you the, at the end, what your score is, what that means to you. Number 5 is, do you feel strained when you're around your relative? And number 6, do you feel, this is a really important one, so I want people to pay attention to this. Do you feel your health has suffered because of your involvement with your relative? One of the most common things that happens when people become care partners is that they prioritize their loved one's needs over their own. So people will make sure that their loved one gets to their doctor's visits, takes their medication, eats, but at the same time, they're putting off their own doctor's appointments because it's too much and you prioritize your loved one, you're not exercising, you're eating on the run. So I just really want people to think about that one for themselves. There's some real long-term consequences to that. If we can go to number 7, then. Thank you. And number 7 is an interesting one. Do you feel you don't have as much privacy as you would like because of your relative? And this can be something simple as we all like our downtime. And I mean, I know personally, when I come home from work, I work with the public. It can be stressful at times. And if I pull into the driveway and my husband's car is not there, I have a moment of happiness, I have to say. And I think, oh, great, I have a little time to myself. And so it can mean something as simple as that is that ability to be alone and have time to you, which does get taken up. Ken says, unfortunately, we didn't actually meet our social worker. Nothing discussed even at discharge. Yeah, that's, I think, going back to when the scales are given and who provides these scales. And Ken, to be honest, it's become worse since COVID and since when Denise had her stroke. So that's why I really applaud people who took the time to come this morning and are working on finding this balance. It's a long process. Do you, number 8, I'm going to get back to these so we can keep on track. Do you feel your social life has suffered because you are caring for your relative? And stroke can be a very isolating experience, stroke and aphasia, very, very isolating. And so it's isolating not only for the person who had the stroke, but their care partner. And sometimes, like, you could feel guilty going out and doing something with friends if your loved one's been alone all day and, you come home and then you're just gonna like give them dinner and go out again. It can feel a little bit unkind. Can we just go back to the other slide? Thank you. Number 9 is along that vein. Do you feel you've lost control of your life since your relative's illness? Number 11, do you feel uncertain about what to do for your relative? We see this quite a bit in there's a caregiver or care partner support group that Just Ask sponsors once a month. And we see that quite often, is that people have a situation, they recognize that they need some support and assistance with it, but they don't really know how to handle it. And it can be something like simple, like folks aren't motivated to continue with their rehab. And how do you do that? Do you keep pressing people? Do you step back a bit? Like what tactic is best? And we see it a lot in folks where, maybe someone's struggling with a depression post-stroke. And how do you do a tough love kind of thing? Do you encourage them to see a doctor? Like, how do you handle that? So this uncertainty, I think, is a huge challenge. Number 11 is, do you feel you should be doing more for your relative? And then finally, number 12, do you feel you could do a better job in caring for your relative? So that's the scale. And like I say, you complete it, you measure your own, personal feelings, then you add up the score, and the end score indicates whether, and ideally collaboratively, you work with somebody to say, these are my areas of need particularly, and how can I meet those? This would be a good scale to use, and then reach out to someone like Deb Burton from Rhode Island Elder Info, who might be able to give ideas of individualized planning for your loved one. So that's the point of these tools. They're not the be all and end all, but I think sometimes it's important to narrow down our needs. So if we can go to the next slide. This is the highlight of this morning, The Other Voices of Aphasia. This play was written by Judy Blatt, who I learned this morning is also a recent published author. And it was directed by Jerry Kaplan. The cast members, and some of the cast members are in the audience today, which I find very thrilling, and may be able to answer some of our questions as well in the end in the Q&A. So when I first saw this, it just spoke to me so much, like everything from at the beginning of it, I'm not going to give away big details, but at the beginning of it, it talks about learning about your loved one's stroke. And still to this day, I remember I got some devastating news about my husband, and this is over 30 years ago now. And I still remember the dress I was wearing that day. And it is funny how things get embedded in your mind like that. So I think it resonates probably especially for stroke survivors and their partners, but I think for all caregivers, it's very meaningful. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to have an introduction by Judy. She's going to tell us a little bit about her inspiration for this. And then we're going to show a video of the play. After that, what we're going to do is have a brief, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes to talk about any immediate reactions you may have to this. Then Deb Burton is going to do the presentation on resources for people. And then we're going to open it up to the panel discussion and really dive into coping with the emotional impact of being a care partner. So I'm going to turn it over now to Judy Blatt. And thank you very much, Judy, for joining us this morning.
Okay. Should I begin?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay. The last time my husband was able to say more than a couple of words at a time was December 28th, 1983. He was 48. That's when he had his stroke. And 3 days ago was his birthday. He turned 88. It's been quite a journey of almost 40 years for Howie and for me. I was lucky. I met the people who started the Boston Community Aphasia Group, and my husband and I were present at the first meeting and once a month for years after that. Because I knew what I needed were people to talk to who had gone through the same experience that I had. And going to the aphasia meetings changed our lives because we met people living through similar experiences. We understood each other, we found friends. There was laughter and tears, but mostly laughter, thanks to our wonderful leader, Jerry Kaplan. I was a third grade teacher, and I loved to write plays for my students. Everyone in the aphasia group had their own story. I thought it would be interesting to take all the stories, put them together, not in a play. I did not write a play. It's sort of a choral reading. It's a performance piece. That's what I think of it. It's a performance piece, not a play. So that's what I did. I asked family members just a few questions, like what happened? How are you doing now? And what you're about to hear is the result of my questions. I didn't make anything up. These are all true stories. These are the stories of people who attended the meetings at that time. I know I would get different stories if I questioned members of the group now. The details would be different, but the feelings would be the same. And so here is the performance piece, The Other Voices of Aphasia. To tell you about what we're going to do. Over 20 years ago, when the group was meeting, I approached members of our support group, of our aphasia group, and I just asked people, and you know, everybody has a story. Whoever you are, you've got a story. So I approached everyone, and I said, just tell me your story. What happened to you? And this is the result. And it's all true. Every story we talk about, somebody told me that story. So, here we go. We are the other voices of the aphasia community group. The wives,
Husbands, sisters, and brothers,
brothers-in-law,
and sisters-in-law,
children,
friends of those who cannot speak for themselves,
this is our story and their story.
Of how our lives changed when they experienced brain
attack.
It was Halloween. My kids will never forget that because it was the last time their father ever went trick-or-treating with them.
It was a few days after Christmas, and our daughters were home from college.
It was after 5 in the morning when I heard Bob fall.
Peggy had been talking to the traffic department of the local police when she noticed she was losing her speech.
Bill was in the Air Force in Wiesbaden, Germany. We had apple trees in our yard. He had been up on a ladder pruning a tree when he suffered an aneurysm. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that the doctors realized he had also broken his leg when he fell from the tree.
We were on vacation in North Haven, Maine, when Tom had his stroke. 1 minute he was husband, father, doctor, sailor, friend. The next he was hidden beneath a stroke-induced fog.
I thought only very old people had strokes. My husband was 48.
Janice's doctors thought she was suffering from postpartum depression when she complained of pain. But the night before she was due to go home from the hospital with her new baby, she collapsed. She was only 22.
Our daughter's a cappella group was coming to our house to practice and spend the night. A fire was burning in the fireplace and the popcorn was popping. But as the 4 cars of college students pulled into the driveway, the ambulance was pulling out.
It was a successful back operation, and immediately after the surgery, Max seemed fine. 36 hours later, he could not move or speak.
When the police officer asked me why I had called 911, I responded that something was wrong with my husband, but I didn't know what.
I didn't know anyone that had ever had a stroke.
We were fortunate that the whole family was home when it happened.
When Jan didn't show up at Brandeis where she was teaching, the faculty assumed that she was still in Smith College, where she had been rehearsing for the world premiere of a new opera. She lay on the floor in her house in Andover for 3 days before the police broke in and found her.
David could hear his brother knocking on the door, but he couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He couldn't tell him that he needed help. He was alone for 2 days before he was discovered.
Dad was in the hospital in intensive care, and Mother was home alone. We wanted to spend the night with her, but she said no. If she had said yes, we would have found her. She must have been lying on the floor for 11 to 12 hours, all alone.
Pat was never sick. She didn't even have a doctor. So when she didn't feel well, she didn't worry and waited several days before she went to the hospital. By the time she got there, she was no longer able to speak or to write her name or her address.
I had never heard the word aphasia.
Nor had I.
Or I.
Or I.
Or I.
In no time, I learned more about strokes and aphasia than I ever cared to know.
My husband couldn't speak. We waited and waited for words, any words, but it never happened.
Howie couldn't say a single word for 3 weeks. They were the longest 3 weeks of my life. And then one day I arrived at the rehab, and his speech therapist was so excited. He had said 3 words: Judy, Julia, and Emily, my name and our daughter's names, and I cried.
The doctors said Mom couldn't read, but we watched her eyes when she looked at the newspaper, and we could see her eyes tracking the words.
Max lost his native language. His speech therapist helped him with English, but his German was gone.
Peggy said she felt like she was thinking in a foreign language.
Jan had always been very religious. When I visited her at the hospital, I brought a small wooden cross. She knew me, but she did not know what the cross was, did not know why I offered it to her. If Jan did not recognize a crucifix, then what else had happened to her?
He said
Yes.
when he meant
No.
and
No.
when he meant
Yes.
I felt as if my heart would break when he couldn't even tell the doctor his name.
The doctor would often ask Tom to hold up 2 fingers. I have a vivid memory of our children standing behind the doctor and encouraging their father by demonstrating with their own fingers what he was supposed to do. They were so eager for their dad to respond correctly.
I looked like such a sad sack that the social worker told me I needed to talk to someone. But I just knew that the only person who would understand how I felt was another spouse of a person with aphasia.
I asked the visiting nurse in our town to give me the names of other people in the same boat as we were, but there were no others.
I was shopping when I spotted a man who obviously had had a stroke. I had so many questions to ask. But what do you say? Hi, do you have aphasia? Or what a coincidence, my husband looks just like you. I followed him through aisle after aisle until I finally got the nerve to speak.
3 months after my sister-in-law's stroke, we brought her from Chicago to Lexington to live with us.
Our daughter took a semester off from school to help out, take care of her father.
Alan and I had been in a relationship only for 1.5 years, but I couldn't leave him when he needed me.
She always had so many good friends that it was no surprise that when Jan had a stroke, it was her friends who took complete charge.
We had our 24th wedding anniversary while my husband was in the rehab. The anniversary card I received from him was the most beautiful card I had ever gotten during our entire marriage. The friend who chose it was very kind and much more sentimental than my husband.
For weeks, my husband sat in the living room. He just sat there. Years later, he told me what had been going through his mind. He was thinking of ways to die.
We were told the first 6 months were crucial.
All the improvement would happen in the first 6 months.
So we watched and hoped and prayed for any sign of change. And the first 6 months
Came and went. And we discovered that the doctors were right.
and the doctors were
Wrong.
Bob's neurologist said he would never walk again. But when he came home from the Braintree rehab, he no longer needed a wheelchair.
The rest of the family had given up on my brother-in-law. 3 years after his stroke, he was still completely speechless. I had him tested, and to our surprise, learned that Dad could read, spell, and had 100% comprehension.
I think our mother laughs more now than she ever did. She tells more jokes.
He gets so angry when we don't understand what he is trying to say. He thinks we can read his mind.
If only he could drive.
If only she could just read or write.
If only he could speak.
If only he could taste the food he eats.
He is so frustrated.
She gets angry.
I never dreamed I could learn to live with a man who has no speech, who has no words at all.
Our house is so
Quiet.
I never thought he would drive again, but now he drives everywhere.
I never thought he would ski again, but now he helps others learn to ski.
I never thought he would be able to use his woodworking tools, but he makes toys and picture frames and still fixes anything that is broken.
He has become a jigsaw puzzle expert.
He is a volunteer at a nursing home, and the people there love him.
He swims every day.
She shares the jokes she finds on the internet.
He was able to return to work.
My husband has mastered the wheelchair.
And somehow we all found the aphasia community group, and for that we are grateful.
When we get together, we talk, we share our stories, ask questions, listen, and learn.
Sometimes we cry.
But more often we laugh.
We laugh a lot together.
And
For that we are grateful.
I would just like to introduce our wonderful cast, our playwright and Judy Blatt, Maureen Albano, Leanne Carbonara, not Carbonara, Shella Salida Mark, and cool Carolyn Obelomia.
We're going to go to Deb's presentation. Deb Burton, once again, is the director of Rhode Island Elder Info. Deb has a Master's of Science in Gerontology, and she is going to review with us different resources for care partners. So as she talks, think about the questions, the 12 questions we reviewed earlier. If there's any particular area you thought you might need some additional support in, listen for ways that resources that could possibly help you. And once Deb is finished, we're going to open it up again to a general discussion on, because I'm hoping people can support one another in how they cope and how they got through a difficult day. So Deb, you're up.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Denise, for inviting me to speak to this group at your conference. I'm really glad the Rhode Island Department of Health and the National Aphasia Association were able to be the sponsors, because I think something that Carol had said just now really resonates. If there are folks around the country or even here in Rhode Island that need this information, maybe creating what you have in Boston right here in Rhode Island is a great next step, because it's by working together that we can all get through some really challenging times. So I'm really grateful to be able to participate in this conference, because this is really amazing. That play that Judy created, it brings up a lot of emotions for a lot of people. And I think that's really important to recognize in ourselves. You know, a lot of times when we become caregivers or care partners, we were somebody's partner the day before, and then the call came or the ambulance ride. And like all of a sudden, it's like looking through a kaleidoscope where in some ways you can see like what you need to do in the next 5 minutes or 5 hours. Maybe you need to figure out, how do I get to the cafeteria because I have got to eat something and then I'm going to rush back to the bedside. Maybe it is, I had a dentist appointment tomorrow. I guess I'm not getting that filling done. How do I do this? And then that kaleidoscope changes a little bit, and it's Friday afternoon. What do you mean they're coming home today and home care is going to start on Monday? How am I doing this? And I think from a healthcare perspective, sometimes it's hard for the clinicians to see it from the care partner's perspective. And how on earth do you navigate trying to do all the things that you had expected to be doing today and tomorrow and the next day? And that puzzle just got upended and dumped out, and you don't even have a picture of how to put it back together. And for good or ill, your experiences are not unique. And trying to figure out what you need and when you need it is something that I think is probably always going to be changing. So I happen to be a nerd about aging and all things related to aging. You know, like how some people know like all of Tom Brady's stats and all of the Patriots information, and they like get super excited about that. Well, for me, it's like that with aging and aging resources. It makes my brain buzz. And so I have a master's degree in gerontology in the management of aging services. But what that really boils down to is everything about aging and resources and how to stay independent really makes my brain buzz. So I like looking for that kind of information. And so the Gerontological Society back in, I think it was 2017, put out a call from all the experts around the country and said, when you're a caregiver, what is your experience as the top experts in the country? What is your experience when you're the caregiver? And uniformly, we're talking about the top PhD folks around the country said, oh my goodness, this is not easy. This is really hard to navigate and trying to balance all these things. So I think it's really important that you recognize as a care partner that it's not easy, and it's not easy for anybody else either. And to give yourself that grace and not have unrealistic expectations about, I should just know this. Nobody was born knowing this. And so when the question comes up, when should you give the information about caregiver support groups? I'm with Ken. Give that information out right away, because is it something that maybe you are ready to get connected and participate in a group right away? Maybe for some. Maybe it's the ability to shoot over an email to somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning when you don't know what to do, and have that person respond in the morning and get you the information they need. Those are all options that can happen when you're connected and you have that information up front. Now, there are other things that come a little later in the progress. So maybe you're looking for home care and you're trying to figure out, when you first get home, the hospital will have set you up with visiting nurses, and they're going to come out usually 24 to 48 hours. And they're going to do an assessment, and they're going to figure out, do you need PT or OT or speech therapy? Do you need a home health aide to bathe? And that'll be covered usually under your insurance for a period of time, as long as you continue to make progress. Once the individual plateaus and stops making progress, and under Medicare, it's at 100 days, then usually it stops. And you say, trying to get on and off the toilet is still kind of a challenge. What now? And that's where you can look at potentially hiring in home care staff. And every home care agency, I see that there's people here from around the country, so I don't want to specify any particular home care agency, but you can get a home care agency. Many of them, the going rate runs on average $35 to $40 per hour. Many of them nationwide have a minimum number of hours that you have to have someone in for. Well, last week before I was a care partner, I really wasn't expecting to have that expense. So what now? If your loved one or yourself, your spouse or your loved one is a veteran, there may be benefits available through the VA. And that's something that you can reach right out to the Veterans Benefits Administration to find out. In other states, so I'm in Rhode Island, and it's not correct in Rhode Island. In other states, every city and town has a veteran service officer who can help residents apply for VA benefits. In Rhode Island, we have veteran service organizations that have some folks who can help you apply for benefits, but they're not in every city and town. We aspire to that one day, but we're not there yet. When you're thinking about caregiver and the support you might need, think about the faith communities that you have participated in. Think about the different organizations that you have been a part of and reach out to them. Sometimes as a caregiver, you're in the house with that same person 24/7. And I forgot who it was that said it, but you love them, they're your partner, they're your life, and you are taking care of them and trying to get them back up and running as it is. But oh my goodness, could they please put the seat down on the toilet? Those things still come up. And your friends around you will understand that. And sometimes it is having your friends simply call and say, how do you take your coffee? I'm on my way. And creating those support circles so that you have that kind of support around you. Now, as time progresses. So we're looking, yep.
I think there's a chat in the box asking about the veterans in Rhode Island. Can you give specific information about Rhode Island VA? How to reach
Yeah.
them?
So there's a couple of different options to reach veterans in Rhode Island. And the directions in Rhode Island, I find this to be the best way to reach a human being. I'm not a fan of calling and being left on hold. So for those folks who are in Rhode Island, go to the Providence VA Hospital, Valet Park. Take the elevator to the basement where the cafeteria and the barber shop are. And I know that this sounds crazy. When you are facing the barber shop is going to be on your right. It's a mirror image here on Zoom, so right may look different for you, but when you're facing the barber shop is going to be on your right. Turn down that hallway. Approximately 3 doors down on your left is going to be a clipboard. Put your name on the clipboard and wait. I don't know how. Magically, people pop out of those 3 doors and come down and will invite you in, and they will help you. They are with the Veterans Benefits Administration. And one of the things I think that folks get mixed up about, understandably so, there is a difference from the Providence VA Hospital or any VA hospital and the Veterans Benefits Administration. So one provides care, one provides payment for that care. And so you want to take a look at that. And there have been a lot of changes in veterans benefits since the PACT Act was signed in I think it was signed in June of last year. So even though you may not have had any eligibility for benefits prior to June of 2022, you may be eligible for benefits now, and it's always worth inquiring. And that's true regardless of what city or state you might be in. I'm also kind of curious where people may be. So if you wanted, you could throw it in the chat. I also see here, there was a question about when I said, as long as you're making progress until you plateau. So plateauing is leveling off. If you have reached a point where you're not making progress in your rehabilitative therapy, that's called a plateau. And so it's kind of like saying,
I think Ken was being silly because we do not use that word plateau with aphasia because we don't, there's never plateau. We always continue. It may not be big steps anymore, but there's little steps. So
absolutely.
Ken thinks he's funny.
I love Ken. That's okay. He can be funny.
It's a therapist term, isn't it?
It is. It's something
Yeah.
that the medical community, and i.e. insurance company,
Yes.
will identify. And it's for billing purposes. But that's not to say that people don't continue to excel beyond what the insurance company says, because who the heck is the insurance company to tell me what I am and am not able to do in the future? And that's really the point of the term plateau. And I love what Linda just said. Progress comes in spurts rather than in plateaus. It's absolutely true. And that's part of that whole kaleidoscope of caregiving where things kind of bounce around. You know, the other thing to be aware of is you weren't expecting to be a caregiver. And it's perfectly natural and normal to feel frustrated and sad and angry. Allow yourself space to mourn. Mourn for all the things that you thought were going to be that are now not what the picture in your head was. And give yourself that space. And if you need to go see a therapist, please do, because one of the things that really struck me in Judy's play is that their loved one was in the other room contemplating ending their life. And I want people to know that there are help and resources out there to support you. If you're in crisis, you can always call 911. You can always, from any phone, cell phone, home phone, dial 988, and someone will answer and provide support to you. There was another person who had asked about who gives this caregiver assessment. Who tries to find out what is actually happening with the caregiver? And the assessment can be done by your own physician, you as the caregiver, your own physician. But it can also be done by your loved one's physician with you. And if your doctor's not familiar with it, because unfortunately a lot of times things have to do with billing codes, also goes back to that word plateau. But with billing codes, there is a billing code that the doctor can bill the insurance company for conducting a caregiver assessment as part of care planning. And so there's not a reason that the doctor couldn't do that and shouldn't do that. The other part is when we're frustrated, when we're burned out, that can be the time where you feel really short-fused and you may make poor choices in regards to how you treat someone else. And it's really important that you reach out for help to get the support that you need before it can become abusive. You know, sometimes you may have an individual who keeps repeating the same word, and it's just, you snap and say, you know, geez, would you just be quiet? Will you just shut up? Would you just go in the other room? I'm just going to shut the door. And it can be hard. And when you're feeling like that, walk away. We don't want anyone to be harmed, but also reach out. So here in Rhode Island, you would reach out to the Office of Healthy Aging, and they can get you connected with services. In other states, it may be a council on aging or a state unit on aging, and they can send caseworkers out to the house to help you get connected to the support services that you may be eligible for. So you've got a multitude of different kinds of support. You have your
Deb,
family.
Deb, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but you talk about the elders, people older, and as we're talking about, a lot of people with aphasia are younger. Do they qualify for some of these programs, or do I have to wait until meeting that age of considered elders?
So because a lot of times individuals have a disability, many of the services overlap one another. So although we think of older adults, not all older adults need services, not all older adults have disabilities. The reverse is also true. Not all younger people don't. And so many of these services are intertwined. So if you are a younger person and you need help with home care, again, the agencies will be able to help you apply for those services so that you can get the care that you need. It's important that when possible, that you connect as a younger person who may have a disability with support groups that are more appropriate for a younger population, just because the conversation is different. The people you hang out with are most likely different. I'm going to a graduation party later today, and I have not been in my early 20s in a very long time. The graduate and her friends are going to be having very different conversations than myself and her mom and our friends. And so when we're looking at that support, that's also something to really think about from a caregiver support standpoint. So the other part is, if there comes a time, and you want to think about this maybe ahead of time, at what point do you think it may be that you're not able to be the care partner at home? So for example, if you are caring for someone who's younger and you're older, if you're not able to lift them anymore, you want to have these conversations ahead of time. because it's better to have a plan in place ahead of time than try to make up a plan in a crisis. So have open conversations. You've all faced things that were shocking and unplanned for at best. And so if you have honest dialogues about, okay, like, what is our plan in the future? What is the plan if we need to fly out west for a wedding? How do we do that? You would make a plan. The same is also true as we get older. And it doesn't matter if you're 22 or 82. Make a plan. The other part, make sure that if, when possible, I should say, that you have sort of a support buddy, that person that you can reach out to at 3 o'clock in the morning. We all have them. And if also possible, and this is part of a support group system, have friends and people in your group who are further down the road than you are now, so that you can see there are trailblazers. Because when we watched the play, in the beginning, we heard how challenging it was and how the information given was really kind of all over the place. This is as good as it gets. No, it's not as good as it gets. You're going to be able to do this. No, you're not going to be able to do this. If you see that there's someone down the road who is 3 months out from where you are, 6 months out, a year, multiple years, it gives you hope. And that's one of the things I really loved about Judy's play, is that it did allow that excitement about what is coming in the future. So I've talked a lot, and I want to make sure that there's time for me to be able to answer questions. So please fire away. I want to answer the questions that you may have, anything at all.
Can you post your website too, in case I want to contact you afterwards? And if not,
Absolutely.
it's on our website also. But yeah, please ask questions. Oh, here you go, Elaine. It's all yours.
You're muted.
Hi, sorry about that. Thank you very much, Deb. That was great. I think this might be a good time for us to, Ben, if you can go to the next slide, and then we can maybe perhaps go into our general discussion. The next slide is coping with the emotional impact of a stroke. So I want to make sure we have at least a few minutes for people to share with each other what has worked for them. I want people to be able to walk away with some useful tools. I put this quote in, and I'm going to read it quick. It just says self-compassion, and self-compassion is being kind to yourself, is a powerful tool you can use to improve your well-being, self-confidence, and resilience. Many people find it easy to have compassion for others, but struggle in applying the same kindness to themselves. By taking moments throughout the day to pause and practice self-compassion, you can gradually increase this quality and make it a more regular habit in your life. So I wanted to close today's segment out with, if you'll go to the next slide, Ben, please. This discussion of how do we practice self-compassion for ourselves? And it is a work in progress for myself, and I'm really making it a point to try to be a little bit kinder to myself, for lack of a better word, and incorporate these small things into my day that I like. Like right now I have a flower garden, and I'll take 5 minutes and pick myself fresh flowers and put it in the bedroom or something, and it makes me very happy. So it's a small little thing, but it's helps me cope.